The balance breakdown is back in your lives, folks. Absolutely delighted as always to be joined by Harry Powell. We are going to discuss UFC 295, which happened this past weekend. Madison Square Garden brought the magic again, a barn burner of a card. Lots to discuss, lots to talk about. Can't wait to get into it. Harry, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm grand now. I can't complain. We always break the fourth wall, so I might as well not even say it anymore. But we're recording this about 5 hours earlier than we usually do.
You're going to be full of beans today.
I'm full of fucking beans. I am ready to fucking go. But yeah, I'm good. MMA has a weird thing, like especially the UFC. But the UFC has a weird way of it's a really abusive relationship you have with the UFC.
It is. I say it all the time, man.
Like there's so many cards, and I'm like, this is fucking not worth it. It's not, the juice is just not worth the squeeze. And then you get a card like this, and you're like, baby, we're back. Like, oh my god!
Because look, let's be honest here for a second. You know, you've been having, and I've been having too. A lot of people have been having a real difficult time in digesting a lot of these UFC cards, especially the last two. And I think it's completely fair to feel that way. And I felt exactly the same too. Sometimes it is a real struggle. And behind the scenes, me and Harry were trying to make something work here where we can, you know, when we go and we start talking about fights and we want to do our content, we want to also have fun while we're doing it as well. And sometimes, you know, we've restructured the preview show. We've not really restructured here, but we're a kind of a work in progress here and what we want to try and do, because having fun and having a bit of meaning behind these podcasts is very important to me. It's very important to Harry as well. And it is difficult at times. I would describe it as, you know, the statement in The Godfather, Harry. I've been talking to Shawnee a lot about gangster movies lately. All these gangsters, you know, you were saying, I'm sick UFC. You think you're out, and then you have a card like this and it pulls you straight back in. And I think, you know, it's what we miss, but it's what we love about these fights. The biggest occasions, the biggest fights, the biggest stories, and we got that. We got everything like that on Saturday night with Alex Bahia, Jiri Prochazka in the main event, and the big story in Tom Aspinall, and a couple of other fantastic fights throughout the card as well, and fantastic stories. And before maybe we get into the card itself, Harry, I want to ask you about the UFC 30 year celebration. I said to Sean last week, it was like, I really kind of surprised that the UFC didn't really grab this by the scruff of the neck and kind of push it a little bit more for such a special occasion. And Sean, when I text Sean about it, and I was like, do you feel that? And he was like, I didn't. He was like, I didn't even realize or didn't even think about it that it was the 30th year until you said it. And then I was like, going to say something before the card, but then I was like, oh, I'll hold off now, because if I come out and say something before the card happens and then they go and pull off all the stops for the actual event itself, I'm going to look like a fool. But we went through the card itself, and it was just the same old regular card. We got the juggernaut of fights coming through. We got really no recognition, maybe. I know they've been celebrating it as the years gone on, but it seemed like a really kind of a good moment where you could have really focused down on it and had a couple maybe of the older stars there and shone the light on them or something like that. And, you know, because it's a fantastic achievement. It's 30 years. So I'm just curious to hear what you think about that.
It's an interesting one because, like Sean, I also didn't know that it was 30 years. It's not something I generally keep a track of, right? Like I just, you get lost in the sauce, right? You get lost in the constant fight weeks. But something kind of feels to me, and maybe this is disingenuous, I don't know, but it kind of feels like the UFC care less about that stuff now than they have before. I think 25 years, that was a big one. They really pushed the boat out. I'm sure that if and when it gets to 50 years or UFC 300 will be a massive thing. But I feel like the UFC are now in the business of making it seem like they never didn't exist, if that makes sense, right? They're such a household name. They're such a prominent star. They're such a prominent leader in the MMA market. Most people, if you told them they'd been around for 100 years, they'd probably believe you, like. And so I do get to feeling that there is an element of the UFC's marketing where it's, well, we've always been here and we're always going to be here. you know? And now, as I say, there will be some landmarks, the 50 years, the 100 years, if it ever gets there, whatever, that there will be celebrations because, you know, even Disney, right? Disney's just passed 100 years and they're doing fucking massive celebrations for their things. So, you know, I'm sure that there will be elements of celebration. As I'm about to lose my voice, 1 second. But yeah, I'm not shocked is the answer.
Yeah, no, I'm not really. I just wanted to highlight it as well, and it's a kind of a what have you done for me lately kind of thing. But you know, we talk about quite often. You know, it's important to tell the story of the history of mixed martial arts, and obviously the UFC are a big part of that as well. And they don't seem to want to do it all that much. So I mean, yeah, maybe it's our responsibility to do it. Maybe we should do a 30-year podcast. You know, I'm up here giving it the big one about the UFC. We have the power of doing something like that. So maybe it's something that we can put in the works just to look back at the history of the UFC. But let's look back at Saturday night. Let's look back at the main event. A fantastic fight. Lots and lots and lots of questions going in. Some answered, some not answered. Was shrouded with a slight little bit of controversy. Very curious to hear your opinion on that as well. Alex Bahia gets it done. Double champion, 7 UFC fights, 11 mixed martial arts fights. I mean, phenomenal stuff by Alex Bahia, Harry, really, isn't it? I think we just have to highlight that first before we get into the nitty gritty of the fight itself.
It's unfathomable, really.
It is, yeah.
It really is unfathomable. Sean and I, on a days gone by, we did a speaker's corner, and that speaker's corner, I'm about to lose my voice again. Sorry, lads. On that speaker's corner, we talked about experience. We talked about a fighter getting to a point where they are able to develop enough experience where they can be competitive at the highest levels, but still managing to hit the apex of a physical prime, a mental prime, all of these sorts of things, right? And Poatan goes out and says, "Oh, that's fun, you know, but I've done boxing, I've done kickboxing, and now I'm going to win 2 UFC titles in like 3 fights." Like, it's unfathomable the ability he has. And okay, look, is he doing this at 135 pounds? No, he's not. Is he doing this at 155 pounds? No, he's not. Fine, but still, to be able to go in with a kickboxing background and very little grappling experience, and to be able to get through this amount of your career and win 2 titles in 2 weight classes it's absolutely insane. Like, it's absolutely insane.
Phenomenal. I would agree 100%. And yeah, look, there are little asterisks here and there, but I think, you know, if it's so easy to do, why, I know other people have done it, but like, you know, there's other people in there, those guys' position. I just think it's a phenomenal story overall from Alex Bahia, a guy who just took up kickboxing when he was 21 years of age and went on and win a double champion at Glory, a guy who was almost retired and drinking, presumably in the bar, when he seen that Israel Adesanya interview that kind of got him back up and going again. And, you know, he offered that outlet to Israel Adesanya this time around, which I thought was interesting, full circle. But the questions we had going into the fight, was Alex Bahia going to be able to deal with the unpredictability of Jiri Prochazka on the feet? He's on unorthodox nature. Was Jiri Prochazka going to be able to deal with the calf kicks of Alex Bahia? And question 2 there was answered within 25 seconds. And question number 1 there, so we found out, was Jiri Prochazka going to be able to deal with the calf kicks almost instantly, because the first one hurt him badly, Harry. And then dealing with it on orthodox nature, Alex Bahia went in there and found his distance and jab within 30 to 35 seconds of this fight, which was crazy, which beggared the third question that we had going in there, was Jiri Prochazka going to use his grappling? And he was kind of forced to do it midway through round 1, and Alex Bahia found his way on his back, but ended up finding his way back to defeat as well. And it was just such an interesting, exciting fight. overall. Like, what was your initial reaction to the start of the fight, and what did you see, and what reads were you getting from both of these guys?
So initially, like you've said, I was just the ability that Pereira has to angle his body in a way that feels threatening to his opponents without him even throwing anything. And that plays into the range games he's then able to achieve. It's far, far, far superior to what Jiri is used to. And what we got to see was that range domination. You already said about the low kick. That was one of my points. But it's just that he's so comfortable in the basics. You know, he slides his feet nicely along the floor. The jabs, they're just thudding. Everything is just thudding, thudding, thudding power. And that must be absolutely fucking awful to be in there against, you know, because you know that you're Jiri Prochazka, right? And you're like, oh, I throw some weird feints and he moves. He doesn't even blink. He doesn't even blink. He just jabs you and you're like, fuck.
Like, yeah, Alex was biting on absolutely nothing. I was like, this is insane. You know, you talk about the simplicity in the movement of Pereira, whereas like having those fundamentals down, Harry, are so important when you're going in there to strike with somebody. And look, we're going to talk about Mackenzie Dern, who showcased zero fundamentals in her fight against Jessica Andrade. And I think you can highlight, obviously, look, we're talking about a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion and a kickboxing world champion, of course, but it's that that's why you're a kickboxing world champion, is because, you know, the first thing you need to master is the fundamentals, you know, your footwork, your movement, you know, your cutting off of the cage or the ring, your jab, the ability even with these short shots to generate such power. Like Alex Pereira, in my opinion, is the best calf kicker that we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. I said that before the fight, and I still believe it now. For like the damage that man can do, every fight he's been in there, he's messed up Israel Adesanya in the first fight with those kicks, right? He's messed up Israel Adesanya, to be fair, in the second fight as well, before Izzy finished him. Izzy was struggling. Jan Blachowicz took them quite well. I have to say, it didn't have that much of an effect on him, but it felt there was a little bit more venom and a little bit more confidence in Alex Pereira and the way he was throwing his shots in this fight in comparison to what we saw in the Jan Blachowicz fight. Would you agree with that?
I think it's because he respected Jan Blachowicz striking more, is the honest answer. Like, I think that Jan Blachowicz is a slower fighter than Jiri Prochazka, right? Less athletic, less powerful. I'm sorry, less explosive, but fundamentally very, very, very good. Like very, very, very good. And so if you're Alex Pereira, you don't want to get caught square. You don't want to get caught leaving your leg out when you're going to get countered with jabs. You don't want to get caught with fundamentals against your fundamentals, you know? And so I feel like when it came to Jiri, he knew that, and this is what I think to me happened. This was my read, was Jiri was almost forced to fight fundamentally because the wild, mad exchanges weren't working. He couldn't find an opening for them. He couldn't get off those wild shots that he was used to getting off or has been used to getting off in other fights. And so Alex sort of forced him, I guess, because he had an answer for all of the odd things that Jiri was throwing or beginning to throw. He had an answer. And so Jiri was sort of forced to close up a little piece. And when you close up a little piece, Pereira's like, cool, now I'm going to fucking destroy you here. And that's then what led to the grappling. And so I couldn't be more impressed. Like, look, Jiri landed a good few shots and Alex took some shots really, really well. It's certainly not to say that this was a complete blowout on the feet. Jiri certainly landed and landed some nice things. But if we were to look at this from a skills perspective, by God, it was a washout. Like, it was an absolute washout. And I think Alex did very well on the ground as well.
I was very interested to ask you that question as well, because I felt the same too, where he didn't panic. He held in safe positions to stop any ground and pound. And when you're a guy like Alex Pereira, and we've seen other people in that position, it's so hard that you not to panic. You cannot panic in those situations because one wrong movement can lead to an elbow or a punch, which can cause a cut and cause more damage. He tied him up nicely, Harry. He bided his time and he ended up working up against the cage to get back to his feet. And I thought he did absolutely excellent. And that was like, I think that might have been the moment that Jiri Prochazka might have said, oh shit, we are in for a night of trouble here, perhaps, because it seemed like that was the moment, because you always had those thoughts, right? The calf kicks were taking him off the feet. All right, he was landing himself, Jiri, on the feet, but Alex was landing a lot more impactfully. And then Jiri was like, okay, the grappling is my ace in the back pocket here. And it worked for a brief moment of time, but he took the fight down, didn't land any damage in round one, and Alex ended up getting back up to his feet and finishing the round strong. I scored round one for Alex Pereira without any question, to be honest, and I'm sure you did the same as well. But talk to me about what he did to actually get back up to his feet there and kind of nullify the attacks of Jiri Prochazka.
Yes, to begin with, I think the thing that was interesting was the use of collar ties, overhooks, and bicep ties, right? So when he was on the ground, he was in a half guard, right? And Jiri had managed to get to chest, and that's fine. That's not a great position in either MMA or grappling to be in, but, you know, these things happen. But Alex just did a really, really solid job of tying up Jiri's arms in so much as he wasn't able to land big shots, right? There were 2 elbows that got through. I counted 2 elbows. Both nice elbows from Jiri, right? Certainly nothing wrong with them, but certainly not damaging enough that we're calling for, you know, round changes or anything like that. What he then did is start to scoot his hips over and over and over because he was slightly away from, I don't know, maybe half a meter away from the cage when the takedown happened. And he slowly inched his way towards the cage, making sure that he wasn't getting hit, making sure he wasn't giving up the mount, making sure he wasn't giving up a side control. And then as he got his back to the mat, he got an overhook and he built up to a post and he popped himself back up. And immediately after that, he looked for an Israel Adesanya movement, which was because he's got big, long arms. He tried to feed the overhooking hand through to the far wrist so that he has 2 grips on Jiri's arms with one of his. He didn't manage to lock it up, but he looked for it. And because Jiri then pulled his arm out, Pereira then went to a wrist control or a bicep tie. I can't remember quite which one it was. And he pulls Jiri's head with the overhooking arm and exit out the back door. Like, that man's been working, that man has been working and learning. And look, don't expect bottom triangles from you know, bottom half guard. Don't look for arm bars. Don't expect any sweeps from out of Alex Pereira. But what he's learning is all he needs to learn.
Exactly. That's the thing. And it's like almost full circle with these guys as well, because, you know, obviously Glover Teixeira is his coach, and is doing some phenomenal work with him. A guy who got brought up in the pit with John Heckelman and with Chuck Liddell and everything like that. And what did Chuck Liddell used to do back in the day? He used to defend the takedown oh so well, and he used to utilize that as a weapon so that he could keep it on the feet so that he could knock these guys out. And that's what Alex Pereira is doing. Yes, he then landed up on his back, but he tied up Jiri enough to not take any damage. He did excellently to get back up and to kind of keep the fight on the feet as much as possible. One thing I was worried about for him was he looked damn tired going into round 2. He looked like he was gassing out, which I found very peculiar, but it was obviously those grappling exchanges that did take a little bit out of him. And I think if you're looking at Alex Pereira and going in against him, you're going to be citing that fact going into any future fights with him and to try and, like, there's a difference between that striking cardio and grappling cardio. What's your thoughts on all of that? Am I looking too much into it?
He just always looks tired, if I'm really honest. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily, but the style, it looks like he's labored.
I was surprised. I was kind of surprised in terms of he went down to middleweight and fought Israel Adesanya, where we did see some grappling exchanges, and he didn't look as tired after those exchanges. And then because he was looking a little bit gassed, like he appeared to look a little bit gassed. And like, I mean, it doesn't matter a hell if you can still generate the level of power that he can generate. He went on and fought through round 2 into round 3 before getting the knockout. But yeah, I was just curious to hear what your thoughts were on that. You're not as kind of concerned about it as all. It's just maybe he's just demeanor in those situations.
Yeah, like I think before I put credence to it, I need to see him actually gas. Do you know what I mean? Because in Izzy, in some of the fights against Izzy, I'm like, oh fuck, he's tired, and then he clips him with a massive right hand, and he's an abundance of energy again. And I'm just, he said something leading up to the fight, and somebody asked him, would you go back down to middleweight and compete with Izzy again? And he said he's never going back to middleweight again because of how badly it fucked his body up.
Yeah,
and
good.
I do wonder what does he mean by that? Does he mean it fucked it up in terms of his ability to put weight on, keep the nutrition in? Did it fuck him up in terms of his ability to keep his cardio, into muscle mass? Like, what is it that's actually happened? Because when I did the drastic cut and I did it horrendously poorly, I had weight that would fluctuate for 16 months afterwards, right? It was horrific. I'd go up and down, up and down, up and down. I couldn't keep a stable weight. And so I wonder with Pereira, when he says my body's fucked from those weight cuts, what does he actually mean? Like, what are the ramifications of that for him? But I think we have to only go on based on what we saw. And it didn't look gas to me in the end of that third round when,
He sure did.
He's fucking mounting Jiri Prochazka and betting the head off him. Like, he looked all right to me. So, yeah, I don't know. I think if we get to a point, and I don't know necessarily who it's going to be that pushes him, right? But if we get to a point where he's in long, drawn-out grappling exchanges and he actually gets gassed, sure, I'll question his cardio, sure. But until then, I think I'd be remiss if I did so.
What's your assessment on the finish?
I don't have a huge problem with it. I have a problem with it. I don't have a huge problem with it. I think that I don't need to see guys with their eyes rolling back, staring up at the ceiling, right? I am happy to have fights stopped before then. He looked pretty wobbled with the first shot. The second shot that sat him down obviously was 2 hard shots, right? He gets to mount, lands a couple of shots. I think we needed to see it go on for 3-5 seconds more.
Yeah, that would be my look. I can't remember what I tweeted out. I might have tweeted out horrendous. I don't know what I tweeted out. I was emotional at the time because I was enjoying the fight and I didn't want it to stop. And I felt, my only argument is, when you look at the history of Jiri Prochazka fights, we've seen him in really, really bad situations, and he has had the ability to recover against Dominic Reyes, Glover, and other fights as well. So, I mean, that's what I'm like. It's such a fine line because it's such a dangerous thing. Like, I mean, just want to try and give everybody a chance to kind of recover and leave it without any reasonable doubt. And I'm not saying that he would have came back or anything like that, because he could have easily just laid down on the flat of his back and he could have took some 3 or 4 monster shots from Pereira and the fight would have been done. And, people might have had their thoughts, but at least we would have known. There would have been no question here. And I think that's unfortunate, obviously, for Jiri. It's fortunate for Alex as well. But I want to pay huge kudos to Jiri Prochazka, who chose to take the high road on it, no matter how he's feeling internally about it, and not highlighting that the finish was an early stoppage, or not utilizing it as an excuse. Like, we can't say the same about any some other fighters, who want to kind of continue on for years and years and years talking about how wrong they were about an early stoppage. But it's not a stoppage that I would die on a hill defending it or saying it was an early stoppage or anything like that. I just wish that we could have seen a little bit more, just for a split second. But this seems to be the style of refereeing that Mark Goddard likes to employ in fights, because it's not the first time that we've had an incident like this where Mark Goddard has been involved. And obviously, stopping fights too late is worse than stopping fights a little bit too early, in my opinion, when you're looking at overall health of these fighters.
Yeah, look, I mean, firstly, I agree completely that we can't. I'm never gonna shout at a ref for stopping a fight too early in comparison to stopping a fight too late. I think it is a very hard line to stop a fight perfectly, right? And something that I will say is we didn't get to see Prochazka's eyes when those shots landed, and we didn't get to see his eyes immediately when he was in the mount. And so for that,
you said that there was shots landed in the mountain. I don't remember. Am I remembering that?
I could be remembering wrong. In my notes, I've said that there was 2 shots.
Yeah, there might have been 2 shots on the way down, but I don't like. I've looked at this replay. It's like I've been looking at it from different angles just to try and kind of get my opinion correct on it. And it's like, I think that Mark Goddard stopped the fight based off the body reaction of Jiri Prochazka without clearly being able to see into his eyes to see if his eyes were gone. Now, and that's a fair thing to do, but the way that Jiri's head was situated facing probably towards Alex's left arm or shoulder, and Mark Goddard was on the other side, so I'm not sure whether he's seen that. Now, there's people saying that Jiri was out, and that was a lot of the talk on online after the fight. I don't like define out, because out to me means you're out unconscious, right? That's what out to me is. Was he wobbled? Did he lose a little bit of his body in that exchange? Yes, he did, but like legs can go, arms can go, but you can recover from that. But he wasn't out, and he especially wasn't out when the fight was over. He immediately rolled to turtle position and got straight back up, and I'm basing my judgment off those reactions as well, Harry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really tricky for Goddard, right? Because
this is a hugely difficult job for a Goddard. This is like
what do you do? You stop the fight? He gets back up, and you're like, he's grand. Carry on. Like it's very hard to gauge. Now, I think it's very easy for us to be generals after the battle. I do think that I would have been fine seeing it go 2, 3, 4 shots more, because if Jiri had been able to turtle and he was able to get back to his feet, then, allow him the chance to do so. But as always, and I will say again, I have no problem with a referee choosing to stop a fight early or potentially stopping a fight early over stopping a fight late. I'm not sure that Jiri was going to get back up from that specific position. It's a pretty tough position to be in. And if there's any spot you want Alex Pereira, on top of you in full mount is not the spot you want. But look, that doesn't matter, because if Jiri Prochazka was cerebrally aware enough and he was able to get back to his feet, then he should have been allowed to do so.
Yeah, I believe so. But look, like I said, it's not something that I would be outraged by, but it's your emotional reaction at the end of the fight when you're live tweeting can be a little bit extreme. Mine certainly can be. You know me, Harry. You've been doing podcasts with me long enough to know how excitable I get at times. But when we come on here, the dust has settled a little bit. Am I as outraged maybe at the stoppage as I was on Saturday night? Right now, probably not. But it's such a difficult situation. But look, it is what it is. Alex Pereira gets the job done, and look, we won't even spend too much time, Harry, about what's next with him. Look, it'll be interesting to see what the UFC do, how quickly Jamal Hill will be able to come back. And that's possibly going to be the fight. Look at John Kavanagh announced on the MMA Hour today that Johnny Walker and Ankalaev are going to be fighting on January 12th. That, if that happens in January 12th, it might lead to a UFC 300 appearance in April, perhaps, for Alex Pereira again, maybe with the winner of that fight. What would you like to see?
So in my notes, I wrote Jamal Hill, right? Like, I just kind of feel like that's the interesting fight. I feel like Johnny Walker versus Alex Pereira is a relatively one-sided fight. Ankalaev is interesting if he's able to get it down. But, we saw Johnny Walker land some really nice shots in that fight, and almost finish him with, almost land that flying knee. And that would have been a horrific land. I just get a feeling that Pereira's range and his jabs are going to be too much. Whereas Jamahal Hill, look, I'm not going to be picking Jamahal Hill in that fight, but I think it's an interesting fight for me. Nice left hand, long, rangy, can kick a bit, carries power. That's interesting enough. So
it's crazy when you look at the kind of style. I'll try to look at matchups stylistically, right? Because obviously there's a gap in the grappling of Alex as well, but like no one has been really able to capitalize. And yes, he's been matched up relatively fairly as well in his UFC tenure. I think that has to be said as well. But you look at all of these guys, Harry, at the top of the lightweight division, and they're all in this wide stance. And I mean, Alex Pereira is going to be looking at all those guys in their stance and licking his lips, waiting to unleash calf kicks on them. And I mean, how can you prepare? Because we seen it in the Jiri Prochazka fight. You can't allow even one of those to land. Like, Jiri was fucked up after that first kick. It was crazy. And it completely takes you off your game. It's like, look, I'm going to bring in Mackenzie Dern here again. It's like people will question. I want to talk more about this, but it's like, where were the fundamentals of Mackenzie Dern? Well, it's like, if you're in there and you've experienced it before, you can have all the great plans in the world, but you get a smack into the face. It could not change your life. It can change your opinion. Or you eat a calf kick, and next thing you get this electric shock up your leg, and you can't walk or you can't put your weight on it anymore. And suddenly your mind drifts from a game plan, and it turns suddenly into maybe, how do I need to survive this? Where you're instantly trying to kind of think up of another game plan on the spot, or a lot of your previous game plan might be gone out the window because you can't put any weight on your leg, or you're dealing with someone who has too much power or is too technical. But I'm looking at Pereira, and if there's a lot of winnable fights there for him at 205. But that being said, too, he's kind of one of these fighters where he can excitingly knock somebody out, or he could get excitingly knocked out. We've seen that before with him too. Any final thoughts?
What about Jailton Almeida?
I like it. It's never going to happen though, because they're not going to put him in there. But if I was Jailton Almeida after what I seen the last time, I'm going down there, because in the similar terms, he could be licking at his lips at some of the stylistic matchups, and he's not going to have to deal with the raw power and strength that he has to deal with in the heavyweight division either. And I mean, look, it's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about in Sergei Pavlovich and Tom Aspinall and their fight. I mean, looking at that fight and what Tom Aspinall was able to produce as well, Harry, was just simply phenomenal. And I don't think that a guy like Jailton Almeida fits into that picture at all right now. I think he needs to kind of spend a lot of time working on his game, because what we seen from Tom Aspinall, given what we know right now over the circumstances, look, we knew it was short notice. We knew, now we're hearing he was on vacation at the time. He was over on holidays. Now we're hearing that he has a hurt back and he was unable to train for the 10 days before the fight. And he still went in there and put one of the most dangerous guys in the UFC, if not the most dangerous guy in the UFC, away in a style that many were expecting Tom Aspinall to be put away. And it was just, we try and not talk about these cards before we come on and record here, but we shared a brief message exchange yesterday just at the sheer excitement of the prospect that Tom Aspinall is, and like we could be dealing with here, and here I go be getting excitable again, but we simply could be dealing with a generational talent here in Tom Aspinall and the likes that we've never seen before in the heavyweight division. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you. I really do. Look, we have seen, and this is, I wrote about this in the spotlight, right? Is that there are some times when you watch fighters and you watch them inside the cage, but also outside the cage, and it just feels right. Just feels homely, just feels comfortable, just feels like the transitions that are happening in life, out of life, are happening naturally. They're evolving naturally. And Tom Aspinall came in after having a ton of grappling experience, bit of boxing experience, and then an MMA career. had gone and sort of trudged along that regional route where he struggled to get fights because there wasn't people around his way and definitely wasn't people around his skill level, drops a heel hook loss, fine, comes back, does whatever. Here we are. And he comes into the UFC unassumingly, relatively quietly, and he says, I'm not ready right now, but I'm going to be. And I'm going to make sure that I do everything in my power to take the correct steps at the correct times and take the matchups that make sense. And then when it comes to it, you best believe I'm going to be ready and I'm coming for that top spot. And he did a bit of training at Team Carbon, now has evolved naturally into the room where he's in with Phil DeFries and Mick Parkin and a bunch of other big guys. And he's talked ad nauseum about find me in Europe a room with more heavyweight knowledge, more heavyweight skill than that room right there. And it just feels natural, right? And he walked out after the horrendous leg injury against Curtis Blades, comes out with a tough enough test in Marcin Tybura. We've seen Tybura turn guys away before and just meat grinders him. Absolutely meat grinders him. Comes in against Pavlovich. Unbelievably scary human. Unbelievably scary human. On the preview show, we were saying he needs to grapple. He needs to feint the grappling. He needs to grapple. He needs to grapple. Now, he listened to us because within the first 4 seconds, he level changed feint and Pavlovich bit on it. And Aspinall was like, cool, I've got you. Immediately throws a low kick, lands it, off balances Pavlovich. So immediately within the first 10 seconds, he came out and he stood in the middle and he showed dominance. He forced Pavlovich to bite on a feint, and then he lands a low kick that snapped Pavlovich's stance in half. And from there, went to work. Faced the adversity.
2 early confidence boosters as well. You know what I mean? And going in there. And like I thought like my opinion on him grappling, you know, when we record our preview shows early in the week now, so it's a lot of early thought, and you know, I think yours and mine's kind of, and that's the beauty about mixed martial arts, is our thoughts and opinions will kind of maybe formulate and go in different directions. And closer to the fight, I was actually thinking that, you know, maybe grappling isn't the road to go down here, because, you know, if you can keep it at a steady pace on the feet and control your cardio on the feet, control the pace of the fight on your feet, rather than getting in these mad grappling exchanges, I would definitely be leaning more on that if he was coming in on a full camp. But because this was short notice, I'm not sure whether getting into heavy grappling exchanges with a juggernaut like Sergei Pavlovich might have been a good idea for his cardio. Maybe it would have been. I was kind of leaning more towards maybe him controlling it from the outside on the feet. And you know, he somewhat did. He ate a big combination, which is going to give him a hell of a lot of confidence as well, that he can take a shot. Because, you know, sometimes you just don't know what you can take until you take it, and sometimes you find out the hard way when you wake back up when it's all done. And sometimes you can just take those shots and keep moving forward, where you surprise yourself in certain terms. And I think Tom took that very well. Didn't panic, reset himself, and then just went back to business. And then, but boom, it was done. It was that beautiful hand over the top, right hand over the top, followed up with some vicious ground and pound, and it was lights out, done. And he's out there living the dream, just 18 months or so since kind of suffering that horrible knee injury to Curtis Blades, where, you know, there's had to be moments in his career where he was thinking, would he ever get back to the top again? Because that's where your mind leads in those dark moments. But what he did is he turned those thoughts into more motivation, more dedication. And it's so strange in the game of mixed martial arts, where you can turn such a dark moment into something that, you know, inspires you to go and do what you did on Saturday night. Like, I mean, I'm almost getting upset talking about this. I'm so emotional. I just love seeing it. It's just fucking, it's unbelievable. Like, I love, like, why do we love MMA? It's for moments like that. It's for moments like that is why we love MMA, like that comeback story. And now we're on this Tom Aspinall journey. And it's just phenomenal to look at, man. It's just, I can't say enough good things about it. Just such a nice, down-to-earth fella, too, that you just want nothing but success for. It's crazy.
Sing it from the fucking rooftops, O'Neill. Like, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of technical things in the fight that I thought were just astounding. right? Just astounding. It's the fact that he set the low kick up with intention, right? The whole point of the low kick was to bring Pavlovich's feet together, was to make sure that he wasn't able to swing his body through talking positions and land big shots. When he got clipped, he made a mistake. And the mistake was that he allowed Pavlovich to enter the range where he was able to land that combination without having made sure that there was some form of range play beforehand. And Pavlovich went in, Aspinall threw a naked low kick, he got countered. Fine. Now, as you say, I think immediately Pavlovich was like, I've got him. It's done. He's finished. I've got him. Because that's what everyone else did, right? But Aspinall did a really, really good job of very quickly resetting, very quickly getting out of the pocket, and very quickly then showing Pavlovich. He dropped his hands. He started moving his head. He started looking at Pavlovich. What shots are going to come? I'm still here. I'm still available. And so Pavlovich immediately was like, okay, cool. I'm not going to blow a gas tank here because this fella's not ready to go out. You and I have talked before that his killer instincts when he has a guy hurt are unbelievable. But he's smart enough to know that this is 265-pound fighting. And so if you incorrectly gauge that your opponent is hurt and you go out and blow a gas tank trying to finish them, that's a recipe for disaster. Now, Aspinall then was like, okay, he hits hard. Knew that before, but I now know it without a shadow of a doubt. He can clobber. And so he started setting him up with nice jabs, started setting him up with the agile footwork and foot movement that he has. And the finish itself, he was angled squarely, forces Pavlovich to rotate to his paw side, opening up his body into space. And because Aspinall was just so much quicker than him in terms of his actual body movement, he'd already cut the angle and he fakes the left hand as the right hand is coming before Pavlovich is even fully square. And Pavlovich has started to throw the counter left hook and he's thrown it so late that it like hits Tom Aspinall's far shoulder, wraps all the way round the back and hits the far shoulder. And Aspinall's already connected just above the perfect shot. Breaks the cerebellum of Pavlovich, and obviously the shots to drop him were wonderful. But for Aspinall to set him up like that, after just eating a massive shot himself, unbelievable.
Unbelievable is right. I mean, we could stay here for the next hour and talk about that, but obviously we have to get through the rest of the card.
Can we just talk about Tom Aspinall?
I wish we could. Like, now we're dealing with a little bit of a mess in the heavyweight division. I guess we'll round it up with this. Obviously, with Jones and Stipe situation, I think the expectation should be that Tom Aspinall goes out there and just defends the interim title. Like, to hell with these damn titles. I just want to see damn fights, man. And there's whatever. Don't keep Tom Aspinall on the shelf to wait for John Jones and Stipe Miocic. You might just end up hanging it up after their fight anyway. We got to keep this guy active. This guy is the future of the heavyweight division. Whether he gets the John Jones fights or not is up to solely John Jones. The UFC will want to put it together. Well, John Jones want to go in there and tackle the young hungry lion. I think, greatness is greatness, and greatness is taking on challenges like that. So we'll find out pretty soon. We're going to find out this time next year whether John Jones is going to want to cement his status further cement his status, let's be fair, as one of the greatest fighters of all time, because going in there, and he's done it once before, tackling the best of the best at light heavyweight. But there's some big challenges ahead of John Jones if he's willing to accept them. Harry, how do you kind of see the overall landscape of the heavyweight division playing out over the next year or so?
Maybe this is harsh, and to tell me if it is. I think you strip John Jones. We've seen it done before, and the reason why we do it, right? You can't do it for the reason I'm about to give. So, just hear me out. But you strip John Jones because if you don't, he's never fighting Tom Aspinall. It's never happening. It's just never happening. And so what we'll see is Stipe and Jones possibly at UFC 300, and then both of them ride off into the sunset. The heavyweight title is vacant, and Aspinall's just promoted up to the full title. So if we're gonna do that, just strip Jones of the title and let Stipe and Jones fight. Who gives a shit? Just let them fight, put it on UFC 300, and we have a full and interim title. Now you can't do that because
I don't think Jones will be ready for 300, even though that's going to be in April. I don't think he might not be back. Yeah, he started. Funny enough, Dana White said he's back in rehab, and then's quickly changed his statement to back doing physical therapy. Hilarious! It was a hilarious moment on the press conference, but I kind of tend to agree, but I think it's a little harsh to strip John Jones because it's an unfortunate injury.
It is.
I don't think that UFC are going to do that because they'll use him as the heavyweight champion as a marketing tool to market that fight against Stipe Miocic, the greatest heavyweight of all time, against the greatest light heavyweight on time. So that sells itself. And the UFC is in the business of making money. They're not in the business of making sense. They're in the business of making money. And that's why I feel, you're just prolonging Tom Aspinall being kind of considered one of the best heavyweights in mixed martial arts right now. But I guess there's three guys. This is a question that I'll ask you. Who is the best heavyweight in the world right now? Tom Aspinall, John Jones, or Francis Ngannou, in your opinion?
I think Tom Aspinall is my honest answer. Just hear me out, right? Francis has insane power and far, far, far better boxing fundamentals than Pavlovich does, right? I think Aspinall has wicked agility and a really good fighting brain, right? Francis has a good fighting brain, but I think he has crazy athleticism, but the agility is slightly lacking, right? His movements are a touch more labored because he's just such a massive human. I think that Aspinall would find a way to get that fight down. And I think Aspinall would find a way to keep that fight down. It could be that he doesn't, and he just gets fucking blammed immediately, right? That can happen. It's Francis Ngannou at the end of the day. We saw what happened to Jairzinho Rozenstruik. It was like, yeah, cool. All this fighting stuff is fine. I'm just going to turn the rage mode to 5, and I'm going to run across the cage and just separate you from your consciousness. John Jones is just the best fight IQ of all time, I think. Just the best fight IQ of all time.
And there's just so many unknowns about, like John has said it, and he's exactly right. There's just so many unknowns of John Jones at heavyweight that, you can't really give a really accurate kind of opinion on that because we need to see him a little bit more. That's why it would have been great to see him in there against Stipe, just to kind of get maybe a bit more of a look from him. But it's going to be very interesting to see. I would expect that it will be Stipe Jones. They will fight probably in the summer next year. I think Tom Aspinall they'll bring to the UK and probably have him defend the interim title against Cyril Gane in the UK. I think that's a fight that he probably wins as well, fairly easily, to be honest. And then I feel the big moment will come is what Jones decides to do after that fight with Stipe Miocic. If he gets the win, will he hang it up, or will he call out Tom Aspinall? Will he gamble on his greatness? Will he gamble on his legacy? I don't know if he will. I don't
like it. I don't like it at all, because then you've got poor Tom Aspinall sat out for what's going to be. I mean, look, the other side of this is we don't know what that back injury was, and we don't know how bad that back injury was, right? It could be that he's like, fuck it, I'm taking this fight. Whatever the fuck happens, I'm taking it, I'm winning it. And then whatever happens, happens. He could be happy to wait until the summer, right? He could be happy waiting until the summer. John Jones and Miocic do their thing. He gets a full ability of time to really recoup whatever the back injury is, whatever it is, get in amazing shape, do whatever it is, and then come in and fight the winner. But even if he firstly, defending an interim title when there's a title booked for the full title is just garbage. Like, it's absolute garbage.
I'm not in any disagreement with any of those as well. I don't like the mess, but I also have to judge my assessment on what's going to happen based off history as well. And we've had guys, I was talking to Andy Hickey earlier on just to make sure, because I couldn't remember off the top of my head, but Henan Barrow defended an interim title in the past, and a couple of other fighters have as well. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. I think the big decision will lie on what John Jones wants to do. Has this injury kind of worried him a little bit? Does he want to put his body through more camps? Lots and lots. He gave Tom Aspinall some kudos on Saturday night, and I'm glad he did. At least he acknowledged him in some way. And I think, how could you not acknowledge him after a performance like that? Truly wonderful, a very good moment and a memorable moment for Tom Aspinall, and I'm sure there'll be plenty and plenty more to come along the way.
The last thing, but I'm going to do an Ian O'Neill. I think that Tom Aspinall holds that belt for a lot longer than Stipe did.
Yeah. I can't disagree with you, because he's going to stay getting better and better and better and better. And it's like, maybe John Jones, it might be a good idea to get him when, he's at this stage, rather than maybe have him run through that title run and let him get even better with it. Maybe him thinking that he might come back in a couple of years or something. I don't know. It's a very, very interesting time at the heavyweight division right now, but we shall move on. As I said, we could talk all day about that. We move on to Jessica Andrade versus Mackenzie Dern in the 115-pound division. And it just wasn't a good performance here, Harry, for Mackenzie Dern. Just simply not good enough. It's like she took a massive back step heading into this fight. My kind of pick on this fight was Mackenzie Dern by decision, with the hopes. Kind of, probably a lot of people's kind of thoughts on this was to, think that she might be able to kind of set up some takedowns and control the fight on the ground, getting down there, but she wasn't strong enough to do it. She wasn't setting up any takedowns whatsoever. She was throwing naked shots there. She was throwing lazy jabs. She was moving back with her chin in the air. Just not a good performance for Mackenzie Dern. And it doesn't read too good for her at this stage of her career as well. And the stylistic matchup with someone as strong as Andrade and someone who can hit as hard as Andrade, the writing was on the wall for Mackenzie Dern very early into this fight.
Yeah, I mean, the best part of the striking was the jab, and it wasn't great. It feels to me, right, as though obviously she's come to MMA and striking very late, very, very late in her career, has had a very storied grappling career, fine. But even in her grappling career, the transition was going to be difficult because she was a guard player, right? She was a guard, sweep, back take, finish. That was her game, right? And so playing that sort of game in MMA is very, very, very difficult, because even transitioning to the grappling, the no-gi grappling, essentially, the MMA grappling, is very different without the gi, one. But two, when she wasn't a huge wrestler to begin with in the gi, then it's even harder to break those habits. Now, obviously, we've seen in her MMA career that if she gets to a dominant position or she gets the grips that she's comfortable with, she's a fucking savage, right? She will wrap you up and you will be going home very, very quickly. But Jessica Andrade is a black belt as well, and they're not the same. When they wear the black belt, they might look the same, but they're not the same. But what it does mean is that Andrade knows what's coming, right? She may not know how to submit somebody like Mackenzie Dern. She may not have the finesse to submit somebody like Mackenzie Dern. But if they get into grappling exchanges, she's no fool, right? She knows exactly what's happening. And it feels like in Mackenzie Dern's camp, it's been cool. Let's focus on a jab, right? And let's try to learn what a jab is. And then everything else will just sort of flow. Because she'd land a jab and then would look like she was in a schoolyard fight 2 seconds later. Like you said, chin up in the air, running backwards in a straight line, does not know how to get hit at all.
No, that's a big thing. Like I was saying earlier on, about getting hit, and Mackenzie Dern, something happens to her when she eats a big shot. Her game gets completely taken off track. And it's like, it's one thing that you really, really have to be comfortable with if you're going to enter inside for any kind of combat sports. It's a weird sensation, but you have to get used to it. You almost have to be numb to it, getting hit in the face and taking those strikes. And, some people find it more easier to do than others. And I don't know. It's just something that whenever I see Mackenzie Dern, whenever she does get hit, and we've seen it, there was another big moment. Right? I feel Ronda Rousey experienced that when she fought against Amanda Nunes, where it was like, yeah, I have all these great intentions, but next thing she gets a monster shot landed on her, and it's like a rabbit stuck in headlights, and you lose all basic concepts of the fundamentals that you need to kind of survive there. Because Mackenzie Dern did start off well, like she was landing the jab and landing the leg kick and staying on the outside, and that was a good tactic on the feet. But what she failed to do was transition to get inside, and she failed to kind of utilize any side style of wrestling at all, really, to get the fight down. It was just basic level single leg entries or trips, and it's just not going to work against somebody like Jessica Andrade. Like you said, she's just going to first of all counter all of those and expect all of those. You got to be thinking outside the box. You've got to at least set up the takedowns with some strikes. And I mean, back to the drawing board for Mackenzie Dern, but her charge towards the title, it took a massive hit here, and it doesn't look like she's going to have the capabilities to be able to mix it up with those big strikers at the top of the division right now. And I think this was the final nail in the coffin for me. I always wanted, I respect Mackenzie Dern as a fighter, and I was curious to see if she could close up the holes in her game in her striking. I was actually very surprised to hear that she stopped working with Jason Perillo. So maybe that's something that she's going to have to go back with, getting those fundamentals back down, but also having a guy like him in the corner to kind of cool you down and get you back into the game is important as well. But yeah, interesting to see. Time is running out for Mackenzie Dern, but Jessica Andrade gets back into the win column, Harry. She's right back in the mix there, ranked number 5 in the strawweight division right now. And, maybe there might be another run in her. Yeah, it didn't look good for her in recent fights either, and she seems to have found her mojo again.
Maybe. I don't think we learned a lot, like that was a sparring session for Jessica Andrade, right? Like stuff to take down, landed a bag of shots, finished the last. It was a sparring session. The name I have is Werner Jandaroba for Jessica Andrade, because that is somebody that has a little bit more of an ability on the feet, and equally does set up her takedowns quite well, and has a really, really good top game. Really, really good top game. So I think that's an interesting one. The other side for Andrade is we're talking heavy rematch territory here. She's fought fucking everyone in both divisions, and
she has.
What are we? This is the thing. Like, you want a fresh matchup, really, because you don't really want to sell the rematch just yet for fucking anyone at the top of that division. And so I think Werner Jandaroba's had a good couple of wins in the last couple of fights. Chuck her in against Andrade, and again, it's a great chance for Werner Jandaroba if she goes in and beats Jessica Andrade. She's beaten an ex-title holder, and you can now bounce on up and try and get a bigger name. If not, Andrade repels away another prospect that's coming up and through. And so you can then, you can ask for a rematch at the top 3 of whoever it is. But yeah, Andrade is at a tough spot though, if I'm really honest. She's getting on in her age, getting on enough in terms of fights. And we kind of know she loses to the apex of the division and she smokes everyone else. It's a tough spot. She's
kind of in gatekeeper status, really, if we're being honest, at the minute, isn't she?
She's Caitlin Chookagian. That's what she is.
Yeah, true that. I'll tell you someone who's not a gatekeeper, and that's Benoit Saint-Denis, my friend. He produced a phenomenal performance against Matt Frevola in the lightweight division. We spoke about this guy and his potential on the preview show. I'm very high on Benoit Saint-Denis. I think he proved here that, the craziness that we've seen in other fights have kind of cooled down and is more composed a little bit. And he just unleashed a ferocious head kick and got Frevola out of there relatively early in 1 minute and 91 seconds is when this fight was stopped. And Benoit Saint-Denis climbing to 13-1 and is a real shaker in the lightweight division. I think a win over 15th ranked Matt Frevola gets him into the rankings right now, and the future is very bright for the Frenchman. Would you agree?
Yeah, I was actually very interested to see Matt Frevola try and grapple. I thought it was an interesting choice because that probably wasn't what Benoit Saint Denis was expecting immediately. And so I was kind of interested in that specifically, but just phenomenal from Saint Denis. Really nice sweep, hits a beautiful butterfly sweep. Then just some really lovely scrambles, controlled the scrambles well. And the head kick was just phenomenal, like really, really beautiful.
Crazy.
I have Hanata Moicano as the name.
I like that. I like that. A Moicano or a Jalen Turner or somebody like that. Like, I think, you know, he's in the rankings now, so he deserves at this stage to kind of fight a ranked opponent. Like, his first loss in the UFC was, as we mentioned, to Alessio Zaleski dos Santos. That fight was at short notice, number 1, and number 2 at welterweight. Since he's moved down to lightweight, he has been progressing, deserves his crack into the rankings, and deserves to take a ranked opponent next, in my opinion, at the very least. But, you know, how confident are you that he can make a charge in that lightweight division, Harry?
I don't know. I don't know, because this is fucking lightweight, right? Now, he is an extremely tough human. Extremely, extremely tough human. And so toughness carries you a long way in MMA. A long, long, long way. If you don't have skill, but you do have toughness, you can certainly get to a certain ability. We know that he can grapple, and we know that he has power. I suspect that he can hang around 15 to 11 very comfortably. I don't know whether he's going to have the time to put everything together suitably enough to start cracking the top 10, top 8, top 6. But I would be very surprised if we see him cracking top 5. Very, very surprised if we see him cracking top 5.
Only 27, so he's got some time. He's got some time to go. But like I said, I mean, the lightweight division is very cruel, and you could run into a couple of losses there fairly lively and be looking to try and rebuild yourself back up as well. And you know, up at the top of division, Harry, the guys are getting on over there. Charles is not going to be around forever. Gaethje's not going to be around forever. Poirier, Islam Makhachev, even at Volkanovski, if he decides to go back up, he's like 34, 35 right now. So, we're going to need the insertion of the guys like Saint Denis, but it's up to him, obviously, to kind of get as much of his out of his ceiling as possible. And I like what I'm seeing so far. I'm not as confident as enough. I would agree with what your assessment is that, I think we can get, a solid top 10 ranking for a couple of years for Benoit Saint Denis, but it's a different kettle of fish to try and crack that top 5, and even harder again to crack that top 3. Talk to Benny Darouche about cracking the top 3 of that lightweight division, and he'll tell you a couple of stories. But next story that we're going to tell is the story of Diego Lopes, who went in there and produced an absolutely phenomenal performance against Pat Sabatini. I'm raging at myself that I didn't give Lopes the credit. I picked Sabatini by decision here. There's just so many unknowns. I know, crazy. What was I thinking? Sometimes I think crazy, but I guess for me it was, I thought Sabatini would have the kind of grappling control to control a guy like Lopes, but I was massively wrong about that, because what Lopes is devastatingly astute in the grappling realm, as well as being like really good and powerful on the feet as well. And both of those kind of traits feed into the excellent fighter that he is. And at 145, Harry, we've got one here.
Maybe.
Always the voice of reason.
The reason why I'll say maybe is because he got cracked a couple of times. Pat Sabatini is not a cracker, right? He's not a guy that hits massive. And again, he's not a huge finisher. And so I am slightly concerned with Lopes's willingness to get hit. He can certainly do the hitting, right? Don't make any shame about that. He can do the hitting and he can do the groundwork. But as we start building up the echelon of this division, getting cracked like that is a problem. Now, I think Lopes has the time. He's certainly revered in Mexican MMA as being a trailblazer, as being a great mind, as being a great training partner. He's done some coaching. And so for sure, people very much like him and love him. I think my question is, what does Lopes actually want to do? Because if he wants to make a run, then I think he's certainly got the knowledge, it seems, to change his style enough that he can actually make a run. Whereas if he just wants to go in and have super fun fights, I think he can absolutely do that too. I have a couple of names for you, depending on what you'd like to do with him. The first name is, if you want all-out fucking madness, Nate Landwehr is the answer.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I love it. That's a great shout.
If you want to give him a step up into a ranking, but a favorable matchup, what about Bruce Leroy?
Yeah. A very winnable fight for him as well.
I think both of them are winnable fights.
Oh no, I think both of them are for sure. No, I think he wins both of those fights. Yeah. I like that Nate Landwehr one though. That, like, you know me, I'm privy to a bit of, you know me. I just want two guys to go in there and take the heads off one another. I do like that Bruce Leroy fight as well, though. But yeah, there's going to be plenty of exciting fights for him at 145, and to take out a guy like Pat Sabatini the way that he did is not easy to do. And I'm massively impressed by that, and I'm very excited to see what the future holds. That rounds us up for the main card. We do move forward now into the prelims. We'll run through these relatively quickly. Steve Erceg versus Alessandro Costa. Another good performance here against a tricky opponent for Steve. He moves to 11-1. He's taken out two tough opponents now at the 125-pound division. And look, this wasn't all one-way street like it was against David Dvorak. He had to had his back against the wall there for a good lot of this fight, but pulled off the unanimous decision over Alessandro Costa. What did you make of his performance, Harry?
Smart, intelligent performance. This performance to me told me way more than the David Dvorak performance. You know, we always say, oh, look, anything can happen on a short notice fight. You come in, you're full of confidence. You got this, you got that, you got the next thing, whatever. This one, first round looked phenomenal, looked absolutely brilliant. Second round, Costa came out, really tried to bite down on his mouthpiece, really tried to test whether Erceg had the fundamentals. Erceg got clipped a little bit, got put in some semi-difficult spots, but grappled really well, scrambled really well, did his best of a job to try and bat away Costa with the fundamental abilities that he had. And then the third round came out and said, nah, I'm just going to up the pace now, and I'm going to really, really put this on you. And that to me is a very, very interesting performance, because it shows you that cerebrally he understands how to mix things up. He grappled heavily in that third round because he felt like he had the advantage, and he forced Costa to not be able to throw his offense, right? Now, we don't score defense in MMA, but if you are consuming your partner's ability to throw offense and still land your own offense, which he was doing very, very well, that, especially when you're fighting a guy like Alessandro Costa, who has big bombs in his hands, is a very, very smart way of fighting. And so, very, very, very impressed with Steve Erceg. I think he's in for some very, very interesting matchups. I do have a couple of names. Do you want me to go through them now, or have you got any thoughts?
Oh, no, there's not too much more that I would be able to add over what you said. Like, a very kind of educated performance. He brings across that kind of demeanor too. Very well-spoken, smart gentleman. I had the chance to speak with him after that win in Vancouver as well. Give great answers on, taking fights at short notice and the way he approaches fights. And he's going to be a guy who's going to cause a lot of problems to a lot of guys in 125. I think that's all that I would have to say. And I'm interested to hear who you think should be next for him.
So it depends what we want to do, right? If we want to keep slowballing him, it's not really slowballing because he's in the rankings now, but you can just rebook match now, right? I got no problem with that, really. But almost everyone else in that division is booked. And so the other name, if you wanted to really push him up, I don't think they're going to do this, but what about Muhammad Mokaev?
Interesting. All right. I think, Mokaev would be interesting. I don't know whether Mokaev is going to be too interested in fighting down after beating a guy like...
But the problem is everyone else is matched. Almost everyone else is matched.
Who's Mateusz Nicolau matched up against?
Hold, please. I will for you.
But yeah, you mentioned that from Makayev, and I like that. And Makayev still is going to have a bee in his bonnet about trying and getting a fight and another fight again, to try and break John Jones's record.
Fighting Manel Cape January 13th.
Holy moly, that's a great fight. Jeez.
Yeah. So you've got, we'll just quickly run through. So Pantoja versus Roosevelt is coming up. Brandon Moreno is yet without an opponent. Albazi is without an opponent. You could do Makayev versus Albazi. Then you've got Kai Kara France, who's not got an opponent just yet. Davison Figueiredo versus Rob Font. Starboy versus Nicolau. And then you're talking about Alex Perez, Tim Elliott, Schnell. Tagera Lumbekov is fighting Cody Durden. Summer Dajri is fighting Alan Nascimento. And then there's Steve Erceg, right? So, it's tough.
Erceg might be just forced to fight another kind of unranked guy then as well, while he waits for the division to, which would be a shame, but I don't know, it'd be interesting. Like they may make them like Muhammad called out, I seen him calling out Brandon Moreno during the week, which is, that is a great scrap, so that's kind of what Makayev is thinking right now. But what he's thinking and what the UFC wants to do is two completely different things. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But hashtag Fight Never Die. We love it here on the Balance Breakdown. But also what we love on the Balance Breakdown is performances like Lupitina Godinez was able to showcase on Saturday night. It's been real fun watching her move up the 115-pound division. Hasn't been always perfect for her, Harry, but she pulled off 4 wins in 2023. It's the most amount of wins that any woman has ever pulled off in a calendar year for the UFC, at the very least anyway. Taking out Tabatha Ricci by split decision in the process. But another thing I'm also very kind of impressed by Godinez in as well is that even in that short period of time, her first fight in 2023, Harry, was in May of this year. So we've seen her in 7 months take 4 fights. And in those 4 fights, we have, and I'm curious to hear your opinion. In my opinion, I feel that we have seen her level up each time. We've seen intricacies of her game getting improved. And, she's not a woman who goes in there and relies solely on her grappling anymore. We're seeing some really good advances from her on the feet as well. And this is a really good, solid win over a tough opponent in Tabatha Ricci. What were your thoughts on her on her performance? Excuse me.
Well, I was impressed with both of them, frankly.
Yeah.
I think Loopy is somebody that I actually cry out for her to use her grappling just a little bit more. I fear that all the improvements that she has made and is making in her hands, which, by the way, were really on show in this one. I thought in her previous performance, I forget specifically who it was with, but it could have been Sam Hughes, but whatever it was. She was so happy at just standing in the pocket, taking a shot to land a shot because she believed in her power, that she ended up in a really, really close decision that she really did not need to be in. And in this fight, she managed her range so much better, especially in that first round. She looked great. Okay, she gets clipped at the very, very end, but she drops Ricci herself. And yeah, just a very, very, very good performance in that first round. In the second round, I think Ricci made some really nice adjustments and sort of waited for Loopy to bounce in a little bit and came in with the overhand right, and Loopy had to adjust. And I was very impressed with Ricci trying to forcibly force the grappling to bring something new out of Godinez now. Her takedown defense was savage. So, that was a sight to behold as well. But I agree with you entirely that the skills continue to be added on for Loopy Godinez. And I think that it's proof is in the pudding of being active, staying active, and forcing yourself to elevate, which really has been a testament to her and her coaching team. I would now like to see, because we're going to be in semi-big name territory in her next fight, I need to see a complete mixed martial arts performance, though. Like in this fight against Ricci, there was a couple of single leg attempts, a couple of body lock attempts, but nothing really super committed to. I would like to see her put everything back together now. Yeah.
And I think that's the best. And I think I think at stages of your career, we've seen it with other fighters before that, racking up these wins and racking up these fights in close succession to get you into the mix is smart in some ways. You keep active, you develop your skills like you were just saying. But, I think that hard work has been done now, and maybe the break should be put on a little bit as you're coming in against these top level opponents where, the amount of levels that we've seen her jump in just that short period of time, you give yourself even longer in between camps, you're going to allow yourself to develop even more. And I think that's going to be more important for her as she goes up into the upper echelons of that division as well. But maybe, I don't know, maybe she is one of those special fighters that prefers that quick succession fights and has the ability to grow and improve. And confidence is a big thing too, Harry. You're going in there and you're winning all those fights in quick succession. You're riding on cloud nine. You're believing in your abilities, and that can unlock some extra special features in your abilities as well. So, very exciting prospect. Anytime I see Lupitina Godinez on a card, I'm excited to see her fight, and I'm excited to see what is next for her. What would you like to be next for her?
So, we can either go absolutely fucking mental and chuck her in against Jessica.
Let's go fucking mental. Let's go fucking mental. Jessica, get her in there. We're going straight to the moon.
Or the thing that I'd be really interested in is put her back in there with Angela Hill. So let her prove to herself that the improvements have been made, right? Because she went in, dropped the fight to Angela Hill, cool, no problems. Now let's see 4 fights apart would be 5 fights apart if she gets it. Slight step up in the rankings. And let's see. Let her prove to herself and everyone else that the work and the effort and the activity and the demonstrable changes that we think we've seen are actually there. So I like the Angela Hill one, but in the same vein, do I think she could grapple with Andrade? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Do I think that it would show her that if she is willing to stick in the pocket, that's a big mistake? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So whatever you want. I'm happy with either.
I love it. Let's move on to the next one. Rębecki, I forgot his first name, Mateusz. I was going to call him Mateusz. I was unsure. Mateusz Rębecki took out Roosevelt Roberts' first round armbar. Nothing too much to discuss in this. It was a catch weight at 158 on short notice. Roosevelt Roberts took the call. And it was another impressive performance, I guess, from Rębecki as well. But I mean, not too much to take away from it. I don't think Roberts kind of will give him anywhere close to a difficult challenge that he's going to get at lightweight. But you still got to go in there. You still got to get the job done, Harry.
Absolutely, I agree. Look, he's a massive welterweight. A massive lightweight. Hits really hard. I think for me, he sold the armbar a little bit too much from the back, and I was surprised that Roberts got caught in it eventually, given that he sold it so hard. But maybe that's his thing. I mean, I know he's got armbars on his record, so maybe that's his thing. But yeah, you got to push Rębecki now, I think, a little.
Yeah, you do. You definitely do.
Yeah, I think the guy you push him in against is Paul Hughes. Fucking get him in there. Doesn't matter who it is. But yeah, I mean, you could do.
We have to turn from since Paul Hughes' announcement that he's no longer fighting at featherweight. Instead of us pushing Paul Hughes against every featherweight, we're going to have to turn our attention to pushing Paul Hughes to every lightweight now at this stage. So that is a good shout. But it's you look at it, and I think this was short notice. Obviously, Paul spoke about there might be complaints. Paul would be a likelihood type of a guy who would come in here at short notice, but the fact that it was in the US, maybe there's visa issues and stuff like that. It's much easier to get an American guy in there, but you look at Paul Hughes gets probably Roosevelt Roberts out of there in inside 2 minutes, in my opinion, if he was to ever get matched up against them. So, I hope so much that happens. Let's not lean down the other road of a Paul Hughes rant. We don't have time for that 1 hour and 17 minutes into the podcast. But a couple of big tests ahead for Rębecki, and I think that's the way it needs to be as well. Moving on, we'll rattle through these now, Harry. Sadykhov versus Borshchev was a really fun fight, wasn't it?
It was.
Mixture of exciting moments from both fighters, but for me, it was the defining factor in this fight was the power inside the pocket that Sadykhov possessed and his ability to hurt Borshchev with that. Now, we've seen that in round 2. Look at it was a round 1 Borshchev for me in a close round. It was a round 2 10-8 for Sadykhov, and it was a round 3 10-9 for Borshchev, which led us down to the route of a draw. A really fun fight overall.
I agree. I don't need to see it again necessarily. Like I'm not hugely bothered about seeing it again. It's not one of those draws that I need to see an immediate rematch for. But I would like to see Claudio Puelles versus whoever they decide to push on. Yeah, I'd actually like to see Sadykhov versus Claudio Puelles, if I'm really honest. But I really enjoyed the fight. Very, very, very fun to watch. Slavaklaus's chin and his heart is fucking something that's just unbelievable. Like, unbelievable.
Insane.
Unbelievable. So much damage taken in that second round. So many clean shots. And to go out and then win the third round, yeah, madness. Insane. Fair play to them both.
Fair play. You know, you don't want to see that next. What would you like to see? Do you care?
For Slavaklaus, I mean, it's one of those where I don't know that I want to see him pushed up at all, because I think bad things will happen to him. You're on mute, sir.
I think Borshchev is at a level that he's going to probably remain at for the duration of his UFC career. If we're being completely honest, really, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, Jared Gordon versus Mark Madsen up next in the lightweight division, and just a fantastic performance here, Harry, and a fantastic moment for Jared Gordon in this fight. He went out and got the knockout win over Mark Madsen in the very first round. You know, very emotional post-fight interview after the fact, saying that, you know, Jared Gordon at one stage was on Penn State Station right under Madison Square Garden years and years ago shooting up heroin, and he's gone from shooting heroin under Madison Square Garden to going inside Madison Square Garden and knocking guys out in one round. And I that moved me when I heard that on Saturday night. It was unbelievable to hear. And, you know, it's inside the octagon. It's been difficult for Jared Gordon recently as well. You know, obviously he had the loss to Paddy Pimblett. He had the head clash over Bobby Green. And like seemed that it wasn't really going to be working out for him, but he got his moment on Saturday night, and there's no I would love to see it. I love to see that. That's another fantastic moment on the night. And look at, unfortunately, Marco Madsen, who's going through difficulties in his own right, obviously, you know, having to take some time off. His wife was diagnosed with MS, and obviously difficult personal circumstances that have been going on in his case. And, you know, in somebody's joy comes somebody's heartbreak as well, and he's the guy who had to suffer heartbreak on Saturday night. But you know, hopefully he'll come back and we get to see him again. But I was surprised that Gordon got him out of there so quickly. It's you know, we've seen him going in there against other guys, and it just proves that that Jared Gordon is coming into his own. Wherever it may take him in the lightweight division, it will be something that we'll discuss in a few minutes. But it was a phenomenal performance from Jared Gordon, and he took out Mark Madsen very impressively, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't his own way. Like Madsen was using a collar tie and some dirty uppercuts and was really crowding Gordon. But I think it stands to the testament of Gordon's comfortability in all of those situations where he was able to ride that storm out. He did a really good job of landing body work when Madsen was in the clinch. He did a good job of stuffing the knees with double forearm frames. And then eventually when his time came and he started to wear Madsen down, he eventually landed some big shots and dropped Madsen before he finished him on the ground. And I agree with you that the beauty in the story is what we should focus on here. Forget the technical ability, forget whatever. The beauty in the story, the irony in the story, the full circleness in the story is just... That's what we love about MMA. You know, we were talking about Tom Aspinall and getting emotional at how that sort of manifested itself and was almost feeling like fate, right? We think about Poatan and, you know, he sat on a couch drinking some beers and eventually he sees Israel Adesanya lifting a light heavyweight, a middleweight title in the UFC. And he's like, fuck, I smashed that guy up a couple of times. I'll go and do that. You know, these poignant moments that we allow for MMA to become a vehicle for some of these persons' lives, forget their careers, their lives, right? That I think is just one of the beautiful things. And for Jared Gordon, I can't imagine the feeling to be stood above Penn Station, that same place, when your hand is lofted in front of your people, in front of your crowd. And yeah, savage, love it.
Yeah, because a guy like that wasn't supposed to make it, but, you know, it just shows just an unbelievable story. I there's nothing too much more to add. Let's quickly run through the early prelim section of this card. John Castaneda won a unanimous decision over Kyung Ho Kang in catch weight, 138 pounds. I think I can't remember who missed weight on that. Maybe it was Maybe it was Hang, but it's irrelevant. Joshua Van, Kevin Borash, really exciting fight here. I really enjoyed that 125-pound. Joshua Van took home a unanimous decision. Looks like a good prospect at 125 as well. Jamal Emmers didn't want to get paid by the hour, apparently. Took out Denis Bazooka in under 50 seconds, 49 to be precise, at 147 pounds. A lot of really strange weight class fights here. We have a 147-pound champion, a 138-pound champion, Harry, and further up the card, a 158-pound champion crowned on the prelims here. We love it. We love to see it. All of those three fights, obviously, Emmers took out Bazooka at 147 pounds. Nice knockout to get us started for the night and set up the card nicely for us. Out of those three fights, anything to take home or to write home about?
Emmers hits fucking hard, doesn't he?
Sure
does. That was wonderful. I've got Jamal Emmers versus Bill Algeo next. Very impressed with Joshua Van. Again, started slowly, but managed to work his way into the fight, and some really gorgeous low kicks on that fella. He's one to watch as well.
He looks really good, though, Joshua Van, doesn't he?
I got Joshua Van versus Jake Hadley, if you fancy that.
Oh, yes, son. Yes, I love that.
And then you might not like this one, but I'll go with it. What about John Castaneda versus Davy Grant?
Oh yeah, I'm not angry. I'd watch Davy Grant fight in my backyard if he was to get into a tizzy out there. I mean, I'm not going to complain about that whatsoever. And it's a good stylistic matchup too. Two kind of similar two guys that'll just truck forward and throw some big shots, and it should lead to an exciting fight. And excitement was a key factor in this card. And on Saturday night, UFC 296, it's like the magic, Harry, of Madison Square Garden. I mean, for us, looking from the outside in, obviously me from Ireland and yourself from Wales, and I living in Canada and you living in London town, the magic of Madison Square Garden might slip us by, but it didn't slip by any of these fighters on Saturday night, nor has it ever done in the past on other cards as well. Always when we go to Madison Square Garden, we seem to have these fights deliver, and it was no different on Saturday night, and we've seen some pretty inspirational moments. And it was a pleasure to sit down and watch it. And it was a pleasure to sit down and break it down with yourself, good sir. At BJJ_Harry Powell is where you'll find him. Go over and check out the Severe Spotlight on Tom Aspinall. And each and every week, he will do that on every UFC card. He will break down the best performance of the night, in his opinion, for different reasons on different nights. And Tom Aspinall was the Severe Spotlight this week. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to everybody for listening. Hit the like button, subscribe button, give us a follow and a share. I O'Neill MMA. We'll chat to you next time. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.